Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tennis and Bagels. This is the traditional post-major chat, and it's myself with the one and only Hall of Famer, Steve Flink, a returning guest on this show. It's always fantastic to do these episodes with you, Steve. And we have another Wimbledon edition in the books, and you were there for it. So, what were your impressions of the tournament as a whole, and the final, of course, which we'll get to.
Yeah, no, it was another. I call it a very good Wimbledon, not a great one, only because we didn't luck out with a whole string of epic, hard-fought, incredibly suspenseful five-set matches or dramatic three-setters among the women. But we also did very well, and there was still some very high-quality stuff. And obviously, it was Carlos kind of reaffirming his greatness on the surface after winning his first title there a year ago, and also to do the French Wimbledon double was pretty impressive, given what he had done prior to Paris, only winning Indian Wells. So the fact that he could, and also in between Roland Garros and Wimbledon, losing to Jack Draper at Queens, but when the hard questions were asked over the fortnight, he had the answers, despite not playing his best until the final far and away his best match. So that, it was a good men's and a good surprising women's. We have another unexpected champion who she took her second major. We'll get to that later. I didn't see that one coming. I think very few people did. But they had a very entertaining final, by the way. I think I was happy for the women that there are many times I can think where the women have had a pretty riveting fortnight. Then we get to the final, and for whatever the reasons, it's straight sets and a bit disappointing, a bit of a letdown. Not the case this time. So they ended on a high note. Carlos ended on a high note over beating Novak in straight this year instead of 5. Overall, I enjoyed it a lot.
Great. That was a good summary. I guess I want to talk to you a little bit about Alcaraz's run, because you mentioned the sets dropped on the way to the final, and we mentioned, and I guess it started from the third round, right, against Francis Tiafoe, where he was 2 sets down, 4-all, love 30. In severe danger there, and he pulls out that amazing tiebreak, wins in the 5th, and he has an amazing 5-set record now, 12-1 in 5-setters.
Yeah.
And he was in danger in his next match as well, and dropped a couple more sets en route to the final. So coming into the final, were you anticipating a close contest between him and Novak, also keeping in mind, Novak's surgery, coming into the tournament? Because I thought it would be closer than what it ended up being.
Oh, I thought it would be much closer. I was really surprised. Look, Djokovic had his struggles early on in the second and third rounds, and then Novak seemed to get more and more comfortable with the knee. The Holger Rune match that you and I were both texting about.
Yeah.
And in fact, when I would tell the viewers that when I landed in London, I actually, was when that match was set up. They both won their third rounders, which I watched the next day at my desk at Wimbledon, because I flew through the day from New York to London. And one of the first texts I received is from you saying, we got the match we wanted, Rune Djokovic. And we all did think that could be quite compelling. And instead, Djokovic won the first 12 points of the match, and he blitzed through the first set and then had a little difficulty closing out the second set, but did so and then romped in 3. So that's when I think he started to feel like he was playing quite well, even though he knew Holger had not played quite up to par. It wasn't like most of their previous 5 matches. But then obviously he ends up getting a break of sorts by getting a default from De Minaur in the quarters, and then comes back to beat Musetti in straight sets in the semis. So he had the feeling he was rested, ready, starting to peak. I didn't feel he played. I thought his assessment, by the way, Vansh, of the semifinal with Musetti was better than most. Most people, because they enjoyed the match so much, and because Musetti is such an entertaining player with that one-handed backhand and the slice, and able to come over when he needs to, and lots of flair, hits a lot of forehand winners. He's a fun player to watch, and he did remarkably well on the grass after reaching the final at Queens to then now make the semis of Wimbledon. Nobody expected either result. But I think Novak correctly felt that it was, and I'm paraphrasing here, kind of workmanlike on his part. He won in straight, but as he said, he just played well enough to win in straight. But I also even thought that was a good sign, because you want to peak for the final. Well, as it turned out, it was Carlos who peaked for the final. Carlos, who played one of the best big matches of his career, I'd say certainly his best Grand Slam final, and maybe arguably his best Grand Slam match, certainly against an opponent of stature like Novak. So that I was surprised, because I thought that Djokovic would be dialed in and really ready and determined to sort of avenge last year. Again, not personally, the two of them like each other, but just professionally looking for that revenge and saying, I want my title back, and I'm going to get number 8, and I'm going to tie Roger there, and I'm going to get my 25th major and pass Margaret Court. He had definite incentives to get it done. But obviously, the way the match played out, he just was not nearly in peak form. And Carlos, maybe sensing that, it's hard to say exactly what all the reasons were. I also think, it was astounding to see 2-2 in the first 2 sets. Nobody, Vansh, would have called that. And then obviously Novak made a go of it in the third. And Carlos, strangely, at 40 love, triple match point in the third set, serves a double fault and ends up getting broken. And even there, you didn't sense from Novak's end that he had any belief. There was no sense of, I'm ready to turn this around, because when he broke back for 5-all in the third, which is the first time he'd broken in the entire match, there was no spark. There was no fist pumping. He was kind of, very subdued that day and not believing. And he explained afterwards why, because he thought he was getting outplayed across the board. But just to get back to the match in general, yeah, it was a combination of a peak efficiency performance from Alcaraz and a subpar Djokovic. So that was a bit of a letdown. I mean, back to your original question, I couldn't see either guy winning in straight. I thought we were looking at 4, more likely 5 sets if both played well. Now, was it Djokovic's knee? I don't think so. I think that was the one encouraging sign to me, and he is ready to play the Olympics now, so there's every sign that his knee is fine. He looked pretty comfortable with the knee. He just didn't look like he knew how he wanted to proceed tactically. And he came in a lot. He tried to attack a lot. I think he felt like Carlos was too good off the ground this day. I'm not sure why, but that seemed to be the conclusion he reached. And he sort of pressed forward at times. He maybe came in on some approaches that he shouldn't have. And then in turn, it was a difficult day on the volley, Vansh, for Novak. And partly he just was a little tense, because a lot of these volleys, he was in very tight on the net. Should have been able to make them. He'd net the volley from close range, and he just wasn't good in the forecourt the way he usually is. And Carlos also exploited that with some teasing passing shots, some soft ones, some slices. It was sort of giving him nothing to play off. And rather than trying to hit the passing shot hard and give Novak pace and Novak can put away the volley, he sort of made him think a bit with those off speed, I would call them, the soft, tantalize. You think Novak, if you're Novak, you think you've got time to just close in and put those away, but he froze a bit. And so it was a very adept, smart, he was an intelligent performance from Carlos, and then also free-flowing at the same time, because you saw him, as he so often does, just cranking up that forehand and blasting it and not worrying if he missed here and there, because he didn't miss that much on that day. And then Novak just not quite sure how to combat it. I would have liked to have seen him settle into kind of the lockdown mode, or at least where he just would say, okay, I'm going to extend these rallies a bit. I want to see if Carlos can keep this up. Maybe what I need to do is dig in and win some, which in a way he did against Sinner, by the way, in Australia, when he took the third set after getting destroyed the first two. I thought he got settled down a bit and started getting more balls back. And he gave Sinner more of a chance to miss, and Sinner did miss a bit more. And I thought that Novak might have been wise to pursue that strategy on this occasion, but he never really did. So yes, it was an exemplary, scintillating performance from Alcaraz, subpar, disappointing performance from Novak, and we get a straight set final. The last point I'd make, Vansh, is that again, once they got to the tiebreak, again, you're figuring Novak might have some spark, and he did win the tiebreak in the third set against Sinner in Australia to make a go of it and get that into a 4-set. But here, again, a couple of costly errors, big one at 3 points all, with a forehand miss down the line, and I just feel like he still didn't believe. I would have thought he would have been very determined to tuck that tiebreak away and test Carlos and say, okay, what's going to happen now? Make him remember, make it costly, to Carlos for not serving the match out. But there wasn't that usual Djokovic psyche was missing. This was a more subdued and almost passive Novak. And I thought that part was puzzling to me. But Carlos obviously exploited it to the hilt and played some beautiful tennis himself. He drop shotted at the right times. And for 3 sets, Vanch had never, ever seen Carlos serve that well. Never. I mean, you think about it. He had a break point against him in the first set at 4-1, but he was 2 breaks up. And he got out of it. It was no big deal. Novak had 1 more in the middle of the second to go up 4-2. And Carlos hit a perfect tee serve and wiped it away. That was a big moment because that might have given Djokovic a little bit more of a cushion to be up 4-2, serving for 5-2. And then, of course, Carlos serves to the match and gets broken. That's the only time he gets broken in the whole match. But otherwise, he was breezing through. He won 84% of his first serve points, which is an astonishing number against Novak. It really shouldn't go above 75 against that great a returner. But the combination of Djokovic being slightly off and Carlos having his, what to me was his greatest serving day, that's what we got. It's amazing how little it takes. Because it's not that I don't know how you felt, Vanch. I didn't feel that Novak was as far off his game as he was against Sinner in Australia or even against Medvedev in the 2021 U.S. Open. But he definitely was well beneath his best. Did you agree with that? Thinking of those other 2 matches, would you say the same thing?
I think he played better in this Wimbledon final than he did in the Sinner match in Australia, for sure.
Right. And what about the Medvedev U.S. Open when he's going for the Grand Slam in 21?
Yeah, I felt like definitely his returning in that match was nowhere near what it's capable of.
Yeah, right.
And
so obviously, I think we're both we're complimenting Carlos because yes, this was better than those, but it still was not what I would call the essential Djokovic, the big match acumen, the man who rises to the occasion and makes it awfully difficult to beat him. So, now, I don't know if you heard his press conference. He was quite complimentary of Carlos. When asked if he could have done anything differently, he was like, no, I don't really think I could have because he was better than me in every facet of the game. And he felt like he made that comment about Carlos being a half a step ahead the whole match. And I don't think he meant just in speed, although that was part of it. But it was just, in the way he was orchestrating the point, being on top of the rallies and sort of dictating what was going to happen. So, and he also said he was very surprised about the speed of Carlos's serve. Did go out of his way to say that. So I just wonder, whether there'll be some lessons learned from him and he'll go in with sort of different mindset the next time because, I think he had an opportunity, he had not put the knee through too much rigor, hadn't had any 5-setters during the fortnight and just a couple of 4-setters and one match that he didn't even have to play. Meantime, Carlos, as you mentioned, we had the 5-setter with Tiafoe with the 2-1, 4-all, love 30. Then a very poor tiebreak, I thought, from Tiafoe. And that's where you see the difference. That's where you wonder whether that's something, whether Francis will ever be able to correct that. But it's almost like he said when the 5th set started, I blew my chance. I should have put him away because he served not nearly as big or as well in the 5th set and made it rather easy, I thought. And Carlos was terrific and just blitzed right through him. But Francis, I would have hoped, would have said to himself, okay, I didn't get him at love 30 at 4-all, but it's 2 sets all. This is 1 set to decide the match. I can still do it. Never had a sense that he felt he could do it in the 5th. And then, we saw, obviously, Carlos, we saw him against Humbert where he could well have been in a 5th set. He won the first 2, lost the 3rd, serving at 3-4, love 40 in the 4th. He was in real trouble. And that was the only time, Bunch, well, that and the Tiafoe match, the 2 times I thought he was flustered. He was talking a lot to Ferrero and his camp, and it was a lot of talk between points when he looked like he was going to get broken in that 8th game of the 4th set. And he pulled himself together enough to win it, but that he looked very uneasy to me, and I thought that was surprising, given that he had the 2-set cushion that he got himself into this jam, but he did get himself out of it. And then there was obviously the Tommy Paul match, which was close for 2 sets, and then he just pulled away. He lost the first set and came from behind to win that in 4. I thought he played pretty well the last 2 sets. And then Medvedev, and that was a very nervous first set from Carlos, where he twice broke back. He was down to break twice. He broke back twice. Medvedev served for the set and didn't close it. Finally, Medvedev wins the tiebreak. But again,
Carlos served really poor in that first set against Medvedev.
Yeah, he did. That's what, see, that again must have been, and I'm sure Novak was getting reports. He doesn't have an Ivan Isovich type coach right now, but somebody in his camp was probably telling him, about some of these bad sets or bad, the lapses, and that was a good example. Yeah, he did. He was so tight that he played 2 really bad service games and could have lost his serve again. It was not a good serving set. But from there on in, I think he might have been broken once the rest of the way. It was pretty comfortable the rest of the way, because I still believe, Vansh, that the matchup, I know Medvedev beat him at the U.S. Open, but I just don't like that matchup for Daniel. And it was pretty comfortable the rest of the way. And once Carlos settled and found his rhythm, there was never much doubt. As he said himself, once he went up 3-1 in the second set, he kind of felt that he was in control again and was not going to relinquish his authority. So all of those things, you look at those matches, the trouble he got and lost the serve a lot of times against Humbert. It's amazing to think that then he would find that serving form so immaculately against Djokovic, of all people. The one guy you think, might be able to break him a bunch of times, and he doesn't. So, but again, that is a credit to Carlos as a big match player. You alluded to 12-1 in 5-set matches. He's now also 4-0 in those major finals, but never won like this bunch. The tight 4-setter with Casper Ruud at the Open, the first time he ever played a major final at the U.S. Open, and that was hard fought, and that could easily have gone 5, and he won it in 4. And then, of course, the 5-setter with Novak a year ago, where Novak could well have been up 2-0 and missed the routine backhand at set point in the second set, and then the missed swing volley to go up a break in the 5th. And then you go to the Zverev final at Roland Garros this year, when Carlos is poised to go up 2-1, but from 5-2 down in the 3rd, Zverev runs off 5 straight games, and he's up 2-1 himself, and nice effort to come back. But you look at all those, and what you saw was, a really tremendous competitor and remarkably poised for his age, and never giving up on himself, but some vulnerability on all those occasions. There was very little vulnerability when he played Novak in this final. So, yeah, I think everybody was a bit surprised, Vansh, not just you and me. I think everybody, because it just was impossible to imagine that it wouldn't be closer than that. And those first 2 sets were just not close at all. Now, I don't know how you felt. I do feel the first game of the match was pretty important, because it was just a couple seconds shy of 14 minutes. And 7 deuces, and Novak's got 3 game points, and he gave away 2 of them. He kind of made what I thought were unforced errors off his backhand, and that hurt. And Carlos finally gets the break on another unforced error from Novak, this one a forehand. And I do think that could have made a difference. Would it have changed the overall outcome? I don't want to go that far, but I certainly think the first set would have played out very differently. And because it reminds me that Novak was down a break point early in the final a year ago, and he won that first set 6-1. So sometimes when you get out of a little jam early, then you get back into your rhythm and you're confident. And as I say, I think it could have been a different kind of set, and a tight set, and that he might have gotten into a holding pattern, stayed with him, but it wasn't to be. So I did feel that game ended up being, as did the first game of the second set when he got broken again. The last thing he could afford to do, given the one-sidedness of the opening set, was to go down a quick break at the second, but he did. And the other telltale sign to me, Vansh, by the way, about the final was once in the first set and once in the second set, the break point double faults that put Novak down, double breaks, 4-1 in the first, 5-2, and go down 5-2 in the second. Each time he went for pretty big second serves. And I know he likes to do that against certain players at certain times, and so often pulls it off. But maybe this wasn't the time to do it. Maybe this was not worth the risk, and maybe he was just a bit too nervous? I don't know, but those second serves kind of got away from him. I think one was 105 and the other one was 113 MPHs. And, it just was not, maybe his instincts were just not there that day. His confidence certainly wasn't. And Carlos behaved and played like he owned the court. So it's an interesting time because Carlos winning the last two majors, despite having done relatively little early in the year, and Sinner looking for another major after winning the first. Novak still striving for his first, but not all that far away with a Wimbledon final and a French quarter where he had a default after the quarters with a knee in the semis of Australia. So he's as difficult a year as it's been for Djokovic. He's been in the running there. He's played well enough at all the majors to be in contention, but has not come away with the title. So it makes me really intrigued about New York. Don't you feel that way too? That especially to see how the three of them will all do, whether good chance to me that one of those three wins the title, that either Carlos gets a third straight or Sinner gets his second of the year or Novak finally wins his first. But they're both going to be so motivated, and yet they will have gone. They're going to be at the Olympics in about a week's time after we record. They're going to start trying to chase the Olympic gold on clay at Roland Garros. So it's a very crowded summer. I feel like in Djokovic's case, Vansh, he's going to be rested compared to the others. He hasn't played, it's been such an up and down year. The other tournaments hasn't played well outside of the majors. So he may be a bit more, a bit fresher than Carlos and Yannick in New York. Might be, but they're all going to go through a lot of rigor going after that gold medal in about a week's time.
Yeah, for sure. You hit on a lot there. I guess on the final, the first game you mentioned, if that goes a little bit differently, maybe we get a closer first set.
Right.
Maybe Djokovic starts to build some of that scoreboard pressure serving first.
Yeah.
Did you think? Were you impressed by Alcaraz's return flexibility? Because I thought there were several times where he was staying in on the baseline, but he was doing a really good job blocking returns back into play and making Djokovic kind of have to play really good first strike tennis from the middle of the court, or try to come in.
I agree.
A lot of shots that he, if he felt like he trusted his movement a little bit more, he could have just rallied for the back of the court and make Carlos earn it a bit more. But because he kept giving Carlos a target, and because Alcaraz kept returning so well with the block return, and when he moved back on the second serve return, he could see that Djokovic was going to the serve and volley. I remember at Deuce, in the first game, Alcaraz goes back on the second serve return, hits a passing shot, forehand winner down the line. And it's just it was such a telltale sign that Djokovic just didn't really feel like, and the other opponents that Djokovic played before the final, I didn't feel like they tested Djokovic's ability, particularly running to his forehand, to the same extent that Carlos would with the heaviness of his shot.
Well, they're not as capable. I agree with all that. Listen, I think Novak should have seen earlier than he did that I wouldn't have been so persistent with the serve and volley. There were some isolated service games where it worked. I'll give him that, but it was used. But the point is, it was a little dangerous and a little unnecessary, because why not rely on the placement? Why not swing him very wide in the deuce court, open up the court, and then maybe come in? But I just didn't think his thinking cap was necessarily on properly that day. But you're right about Carlos's flexibility on the return. To me, it's one of the most impressive things about him, period, is the way he's a willingness to, and maybe obviously with Ferrero's encouragement, but to change things up and not give the guy the same look every time. On the other hand, again, if Djokovic is at his best, if he's in terms of tactical acuity and court awareness on the given day, I think he would have reacted and changed things up and gone away from the serve and volley, because he got burned on it a bunch. He also got burned sometimes by coming in on an approach that just wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
A forehand cross-court approach and just giving Carlos a chance to line up and blast the forehand. So, but look, Carlos, I remember that Novak said about Carlos after the semifinals, he's the best 21-year-old player we've ever seen in this game. And he showed it again in the final. His maturity and court sense is just ridiculous. It's why I don't quite understand why he leans so much on Ferrero, because I honestly think he figures things out very well for himself, and that he would be better off to just turn to Juan Carlos on certain, on occasions within the set, but not that often, because he's just so smart and so aware out there of what he needs to do, and he's analyzed. You can just feel him thinking about it in between points about what he has to do, what's the best move to make, how to combat Novak. Yeah, he's amazing that way. And he's gifted enough. Sinner, I don't know whether Sinner would be as comfortable to do it with the experimentation. He can do it to a degree, and he's flexible to a degree, but Carlos is just, is a genius of sorts, no doubt about it. And he showed us why that day.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also mentally to rebound from the 5-4 40 love, game where he let Djokovic back in, and Djokovic had that lifeline to then play the kind of points he was playing in the tiebreak with the drop shot at 5-4 and
the drop shot was great.
I was just impressed that he picked it back up so quickly, didn't let it go to a fourth, because that was another dangerous point as well. And I agree with you. I didn't see the spark.
The first sign, just to back up your point, was the 5-6 game, because Novak had broken back for 5-all, easy hold for 6-5. You wonder a little bit if Carlos might be a bit frazzled as he left the changeover to try to serve his way into the tiebreak, and he played a brilliant game at 5-6 to get into the breaker. Then I think he got some help from Djokovic in the tiebreak, but boy, there was nothing to criticize Carlos for in that breaker. He just played remarkably well. And as you say, the second to last point of the match was a great drop shot. Then little help from Novak on the errant return on match point. But Carlos is he sure makes you beat him. And it'll be interesting to see now whether he stays healthy and how his body responds after the Olympics. He's been through a lot in the sense of winning Roland Garros. Granted, he'd been out a lot during the clay court circuit, but then comes Roland Garros, then comes Queens, then Wimbledon, now over to the Olympics. Then probably, I don't know what's on. I don't know if you've seen his schedule. I'm assuming he plays one hard court event at least leading into the Open. Yeah. So I worry a bit about him. That's a lot for him in a fairly short span. And it makes me wonder whether in New York he's at his best or not, particularly if he has a good Olympics, if he's in the finals of the singles in the Olympics.
Yeah, definitely. I guess also, since you brought up Jannik Sinner, the race between them for year-end number one is really, really tight now. It was Sinner who had like a 2,600 point lead going into the French Open, but now it's like 250 points. And you have this trend now of Sinner where he's kind of falling apart physically in these 5-setters. You can go back to the U.S. Open last year against Zverev, where
it's true.
It's true. And things, and that was a really hot, humid day, and it was over a 4.5-hour match. Both guys were really struggling, but still,
Zverev. And just a quick thing. In fairness to him, though, I did feel like with the cramping, he was in such trouble early on that he did very well to even take it to 5 there. Yeah. But you're right. When you have a losing career record in 5-set matches, I mean that's going to change. He's too great a player to not turn that number around. But you're right. It's it happens again at Wimbledon. I actually thought the loss at Wimbledon to Medvedev, that actually was my favorite match of the tournament, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was so enjoyable to watch, and Medvedev played his best match in a long, long time. Sinner had the dizzy spells, we know, but it wasn't continuous. Medvedev himself made some interesting comments about that afterwards that were not kind of snarky remarks. He just was saying, I saw that he looked like he was struggling, but then he'd come back, and it's true, because first of all, the first set, no real sign from Sinner. I thought Medvedev should probably have won the set because he got a set point after Sinner double faulted in the tiebreak, but it was one of those toss-up first sets where they both played well and it goes to a breaker. It wasn't until the second set, by the middle of the second set, you sensed something was going on with Sinner. You could feel it. It wasn't, something was obviously wrong. And meantime, Medvedev was in his groove, and he takes that set. And then the third set, again, even when Sinner had seen the doctors, but he's down a break. Medvedev serves for that third set, does not hold, plays a pretty bad game. Sinner then the next time around with Medvedev at 5-6 has got 2 set points. And he missed a pretty easy passing shot on one of them, the backhand.
Right, the backhand in the net. He should have made that.
Oh, he should have made that easily. So you look back at that and say, wow, and despite that, I would have thought that ruined Sinner for Medvedev to go 2-1 up in that fashion. And then Sinner blitzes through the fourth before Medvedev gets an early break in the fifth and rides it out. I wish we'd had more matches like that, though. That one was very intriguing, 5-setter, very well played by Medvedev. And under the circumstances, not badly played by Sinner, who did say afterwards, you could tell he contemplated retiring mid-match, but he didn't want to do that in a Grand Slam quarter. He just, it just didn't sit well with him. So I mean, it was probably a difficult decision. Was it really that dire? We'll never know. But he certainly talked about how he considered it. And he didn't say this in a begrudging way, and he was very complimentary to Medvedev for his level. But it was, regardless of what was going on with him, the match itself was a pleasure to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the best Medvedev has played in a long time in a major, particularly when I thought Sinner played such an awesome fourth set. He was doing a lot of the things that disrupt Medvedev, using a lot of drop shots, serving really well.
Right.
Coming forward, frankly, I thought he would start the match playing out like that. I thought he played very linearly for the most part, and kind of gave Medvedev a lot of rhythm from the baseline. And maybe he just sort of backed that he could win that way as well, because he did do that many times against Daniil last autumn, and he was able to kind of physically outlast Medvedev in some occasions. But yeah, overall, I mean, I was also impressed by Medvedev's ability to stand in on return and just be a lot more effective that way, rush Sinner a little bit, particularly on his forehand side. So there were a lot of good signs for Medvedev in the return position and things like that. But against Carlos, man, they just did not. We got a slightly clоser match than we did last year, but I still felt like Medvedev was really far away from figuring out how to play.
He was. The scoreline's a bit misleading. I mean, he did earn his set, fair enough. But yeah, it was definitely better. It wasn't as demoralizing as a year ago when he was obliterated, but still, he has to be discouraged, Vansh. Look, forget the first one he had over Carlos. Carlos was not Carlos yet when Medvedev beat him the first time. But look at this look at the U.S. Open. You wondered, I wondered then, okay, is this rivalry going to get more interesting now? Is Medvedev now going to be more of a threat? So they go to the year-end championships. Okay, Medvedev has clinched his place in the semis already. So you could argue that he didn't want it as bad as Carlos when they played in the round robin, but it's still straight, regardless, straight for Carlos. And then you go to Indian Wells, one good set for Medvedev, and then he's crushed in the second. And then we go to Wimbledon. So it just makes me wonder, I don't know if he's going to find a way out of this, despite what you alluded to with his altering return to serve position, moving in closer to the baseline. He's trying to do certain things to put himself in a more aggressive mode. But I don't know. I feel like he's a lot more comfortable playing Sinner, even though he was on a 5-match losing streak to Sinner before winning this match. I don't think, when you watch the way it plays out, he looks like he's much more in it. Obviously, Australia, he was just on the edge of it. Yeah. So that one, I'm more encouraged that he can keep it competitive. But I worry that in the Carlos rivalry, there's a chance. I mean, I would almost guess if they played 7 times between now and the end of, say, 2026, 7-8 times, let's say, Medvedev might not. Most I would give him is 1 win. I'm not even sure I'd give him that, because Carlos has this edge about it. Carlos has this attitude about it. He doesn't quite come out and say it, but he believes that. He just totally believes in himself against Medvedev, and in his mind, the Open was sort of a I don't want to call it freakish, but he just dismisses that in his mind, and he believes. And what would your guess be if the scenario plays out that I'm describing, and they play, say, 1 more time this year, and 3 times next year, and 3 the year after? How many does Daniel win?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to see him winning more than 1 or 2, just because, I thought, like, if they played on a really fast court, like ATP Finals, for instance, I thought that would have been more up Daniil's alley, right? Like, in terms of.
Yeah, you think so? I agree.
It didn't play out that way when they played. Then, I like Carlos just goes into that match really feeling like he has the upper hand. He already kind of thought he would win when he was up 3-1 in the second. He referenced that in his in his press conference as well, that he kind of had
Yeah,
it when he went up 3-1, and still a long way towards the end of the match. So, that is something I feel like he kind of walks on the court knowing what he has to do against Medvedev, and he's more patient now against Daniil than even before. Like I think he also mentioned that he kind of gave up in the second set of that U.S. Open match, and that he took a lot from it.
he did.
Learned a lot.
He did, because he was upset by the losing the tiebreak, and he felt like he had more chances in the first set than Daniel, and then he made a couple of bad moves in the tiebreak, and Daniel won the breaker. And yeah, it did carry over to the second, which is not very un-Carlos-like in my mind. But I don't know. I just feel like the other thing I wonder about is Medvedev, as well as he's serving, I still not seeing quite the potency of years gone by, and I think that's hurting him too.
It's not 2021 level for sure. He's not anywhere.
No. So that also is worrisome, because he needs that. He just needs it desperately, and that would help, because I did think he was close to 2021 level when he beat Carlos at the Open, that he did serve quite well in that match, and was able to bail himself out on some big points and win the free points when he needed them. And that was a pretty good serving performance overall. And but for the most part, he's really struggling to stamp his authority there. And it'll be interesting, Vansh, because Medvedev, we go all the way back to Rome last year since he won a title, and he's had so many good showings since, in the finals of Australia, finals of Indian Wells, semis here. It's not like he hasn't had good results. But when you're a player of Medvedev's stature, it has to hurt to not be winning titles, and it has to hurt to still be looking at that 2021 Open as his only major title. And here we are coming to the last Slam tournament of 2024, and he still hasn't won another. And to me, it's very unlikely that he wins the U.S. Open. All power to him if he does. I'd put him in that next group after the top three, but well back of them, and maybe alongside Zverev and a few others. But I don't like his chances in New York this time. So it's most likely he will have gone through 3 seasons in a row following the 2021 Open without another major, and perhaps not even another title this year. It's hard to believe, considering how good he is.
Yeah, and he doesn't play many of the smaller tournaments, like the 500s or 250s. So he's always just kind of running in. And the problem is he's seated 5th, so he's going to have to likely beat 2 of those 3 guys in Sinner, Djokovic, and Alcaraz, if not all 3, maybe. So it's even harder.
Tough road, and you sense sometimes the frustration in him. I thought he had his moments at Wimbledon, but overall I think he's handling it well. Were you able to hear the cursing incident? Because I have to tell you, sitting in the press box at Wimbledon, I did not.
No, but I did catch the replay of when they showed it afterwards on TV. But he claims that he said something in Russian. It didn't look like that to me. I thought I pretty much heard what everybody else heard. But
yeah. Interesting. But he's a very prideful guy, and he's pretty honest in these post-match assessments, as you know. But I think this is going to, if something doesn't break for him soon, I think he could get quite discouraged, because I think he believes that he should be winning a major here and there, that he should be winning some 1000s. I think at the start of this year, after Australia, he thought he'd be in contention for number 1. I think if you asked him, he would have said, well, I didn't win this tournament, but I came very close. And so the kind of lofty goals that he might have for himself are not being realized.
Yeah. Maybe it's possible he wins one of those big titles like Shanghai or Paris or something like that, because players are very tired at that time of the year.
Yeah, true.
Alcaraz, post US Open, struggles sometimes. He has these injuries as well. So it's that's going to be interesting, as well as how do Carlos and Yannick pace themselves for what looks like is going to be a really, really close race between them for year-end number 1. And I guess if Carlos wins 3 majors, then it's kind of like, he might still not clinch it after the US Open, but he is like the player of the year at that point. So
yeah, no doubt. Listen, if you're Sinner and Carlos wins the US Open, yes, it might be a nice small consolation prize to end the year number 1, but you're not going to feel like it. On the other hand, if you're Sinner and you win the US Open, and you've split the four majors with Carlos, then you're going after it full force in the fall. But I do think his answer was very revealing. He was asked at Wimbledon about, does he take these losses differently? And he admitted that he does, being number one. And I like the answer, because it's like you can tell, and you could tell as he walked out of the press room that day, and also listen to his responses, how disappointed he is. I mean, between having some of those injury, illness issues leading up to the French, and having Carlos down 2-1 at Roland Garros, and being in another fifth set against Medvedev at Wimbledon and nothing going his way. Yeah, I think he's a bit frustrated too, because I think he believes that he worked hard to get to number one, and he did, and he had a fantastic end of 2023 and a brilliant start to this year. Now he really wants to sort of reclaim his throne in a way, because Carlos winning two majors in a row, I mean, let's face it, that's a tremendous achievement. And now the burden is back on Sinner to prove that he belongs at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. As for the rest of the results on the men's side, I did feel like this was a golden opportunity missed for Taylor Fritz in that quarterfinal against Lorenzo Musetti, because here he is, he's not playing Djokovic or Nadal, he's up a set in a break, he's coming out playing great, and then he plays a pretty poor game to get broken back in the second set. Doesn't win the tiebreak. Musetti is doing all kinds of disruptive things with his backhand slice and, keeping the ball really low, outside of Taylor's strike zone. And Taylor's just not coming forward on many of these approach shots. And he's kind of, falling into Lorenzo's trap. He plays a very poor third set, forehand's missing all over the place. And then I thought once he had the fourth, I thought, okay, he has all the momentum. He's going to start out strong in the fifth here. And he just didn't. And the match just was over so quickly. And I was just, pretty disappointed for him, because I felt like it was just such a golden opportunity missed. He could have played Djokovic again, and he played him very well in Australia. And yeah, I mean, I was very happy for Musetti, because I love watching him play.
No, listen, I agree. I don't think I could change a word you just said. I mean, I think you analyzed it impeccably. And I was over there that day. I was over at Court 1 watching it. It's a nice press section in Court 1. And he's looking up at his camp a lot. He's looking at his father. At one point, his father appeared to lead the match. No,
also didn't really serve well either. That's another thing I'd add.
No, he didn't serve well. But you also, as you said, you mentioned the forehand. That forehand was abysmal. These were mistakes that we're not talking about hitting the net tape or hitting a down the line forehand. You challenge it and it's a half a millimeter long. We're talking about glaring mistakes and badly executed forehands. And that, coupled with the serve, was just crippling to his chances. And you're right. He had that second opportunity, because I think Musetti was thinking of the scoreline a bit in the fourth. I mean, I think he was sensing he might be able to do it. And Taylor could have just started the fifth off a bit better, maybe. But I think it's a pretty devastating loss. He is very good at putting his defeats behind him, Vansh. I've seen that over the years here. He is good at sort of just moving on, and he might have a pretty good summer for all we know. But I just think, look, he'd lost a quarter to Rafa here a couple of years ago at Wimbledon in that fifth set breaker. And then he had two to Novak recently in US Open and Australian Open. That's perfectly, you don't have to come away from those ashamed or you were kind of up against a better player. And he did play extremely well in the Australian match and to push that to 4. And I don't know, to lose this one, Musetti did surprisingly well on the grass, but you could hear in Taylor's voice after he beat Zverev to get to the quarters, coming from 2 sets down. That was another one of the more enjoyable matches, but you could tell he thought it was in his hands. He knew Musetti was playing surprisingly well on the grass, but in his mind it was sort of it was his match to lose, and he did lose it. So I just feel like it's pretty devastating in its way that he felt he belonged in the semis, and frankly, I think Novak would have picked him apart again, and I don't think the result would have been any different. But why not at least put yourself into the semis and see how you perform? So I think it's going to hurt a lot. Unlike Tommy Paul, who he can handle what happened against Carlos. Maybe it was a bit disappointing to him to win the first set and keep him out there for so long the first 2 sets and then get pretty much blitzed in the third and fourth. But still, He won Queens. He did well there. He's having a good year. I think Tommy's in a better place in some ways than Taylor. And then you have Ben Shelton, who lost to Sinner, but I think he's going to come around in the hard court season as well. I'm really interested to see all three. The only thing that I can say is, I just want to reinforce that, is that Taylor, he's something like the loss a couple of years ago to Tracy, Austin's son, at the U.S. Open to Holt. You'd think that could have been devastating too. And then he does come right back. He is pretty good at that. But that doesn't mean we're going to see better results in a major. It's more that he wins a 500 here or a 250 there, or does well in 1,000, and he keeps his ranking up pretty high with his good performances and all over the circuit. But as far as his breakthrough at the majors, maybe it's just not going to happen. I'm beginning to think that it won't, that the quarterfinal might be pretty much his limit. And perhaps he squeezes into one semi, but I'm not even confident about that right now.
Yeah, the thing about Taylor is that he is positioned himself really nicely the last 3 years to just finish always between 8 and 15 in the world, and that is just sort of where he belongs.
Right.
But I just wonder, because he's made so many other really good improvements, he's tried to, he's improved his movement as much as he really can. He's got such a great team around him. Like he believes more now, but it's just, I wonder why the transition.
But Vansh, I have a question. I just have a question for you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to, before you move on from that, you said he's improved his movement. I agree, but is his movement where it needs to be vis-a-vis the other top players? No, we agree. That's the problem. He's done well to get it where it is now, but he doesn't move like Tommy Paul and some of the others. Certainly doesn't move like Novak. So I think that's always, guess what I'm saying is it's going to be a lingering issue for him.
Yeah, I agree about the movement, but I guess what I'm saying is that I also feel like he's leaving a lot on the table by not being better at coming forward on a lot of these shorter balls, and not be more willing to put himself out there, because okay, he's not a great volleyer, but it just doesn't seem like he's willing to invest the time to improve that part of his game in a way, which is surprising me just a little, because I feel like he can get more out of it than what he is getting right now.
Completely agree. But you again alluded to it. I feel like he just doesn't trust that volley. If he trusted it a bit more, maybe he's not so reluctant to come forward. We'll never know, but he ought to at least try. And the fact is, Vansh, that if you do it more and more, the pattern usually is that player becomes a better volleyer, because they start getting better up there more. They're executing. They're going through the mechanics. They're hitting more volleys, and suddenly the volleys that you're making in practice, you start making them in matches. So I wish he would too, but boy, he backs off. You can just see him so many times not follow a shot forward when he should have, and that's a shame. You don't see that from Tommy Paul, although Tommy Paul against Carlos missed too many approach shots. I thought that maybe he pressed a little, trying to make the approach too good out of respect for Carlos's speed, but I feel like in Tommy's case, he's a sounder volleyer than Taylor.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Fritz likes to play a lot of tournaments, 250s. He wins a lot of 250s during the year, but I feel like, if he loses one of these 250s, trying out something different, like coming forward and winning, then at least, you're kind of doing the right stuff. So I just, that is my one wish for him, is to just improve that part of his game even just a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I agree with your assessment about all the other Americans. I'm also interested about Francis as well, if he takes something from that loss to Carlos and he's able to put something together during the U.S. Open, because, he's another guy who I think he came into Wimbledon on a losing record on the season. So he's someone who badly needed a result like that.
What worries me, Vansh, I see it essentially the way you do too. What worries me from the standpoint of Francis is that you can try to console yourself and say, I almost had him. I was 2-1, 4-all, love 30. I break him there. I win the match. I got him into a fifth. I don't know. The trouble is that may be rationalizing. It's a match that you got to finish off. It's the right time in the tournament to play Carlos. It was, you get him early on. It's more vulnerable, and you got to win that match, in my view. So I just feel like, okay, maybe he finds it over the summer, but I thought it was a wasted opportunity, because I think that was a day when Carlos could have been had, and Francis. Francis, who loves to play those guys and gets so psyched up and exhilarated and energized against the top guys, and talk trash before the match in a nice, friendly way, because they went back and forth on it. Carlos commented too. You just want to see somebody like that, make good on the dare, and he didn't do that. And the good news is he likes playing in front of American crowds, and so maybe Cincinnati, U.S. Open, we see something big from him again. But it's worrisome because I don't know. For Francis to start making a move to try to get back get to the top 10, he's so far from it now, so far from where he was. I just think it's going to be a tough road that we might. You talked about the range where Fritz from 8 to 15. I'm afraid that we might see Francis for quite a while be, 18 to 30. Yeah. And more often 23, 24 in the world. Still a very good player and still seeded at majors, but maybe, just losing too many matches. Do you think his ceiling is higher, or do you see him staying there for a while?
Yeah, it's tough to see him, let's say get back to the top 10, especially just would require so much more consistency than what he has now. And I do worry about him when he doesn't play on the bigger courts. And he is having to beat the likes of, like, for instance, Arnaldi, where he was 2 sets to love down in the first round. Like, players like that, there's so many capable players in that range that it would be tough for him to break out of that slump. He might need like a quarterfinal, semifinal at the U.S. Open, some really crazy big result again. So, yeah, he's in a tough spot right now for sure.
So you want to? Should we talk about the women?
Yeah, just one more thing on the men. I felt for Dimitar because you could see as soon as he won that 4th round match against Fils that something was just completely wrong. You could see it in his face, and it's a shame that he wasn't able to play Novak. And frankly, I think Novak could have used that match, for
I totally agree. Yeah,
and I think it might have.
I totally agree with you that in one sense it's a blessing because you rest, but it might have toughened. Novak would have had to hit a lot of balls, test his movement to the hilt. Most likely wins it in 4 sets, but works hard. Yeah, I think it could have helped him. And, it's a double-edged sword. In one sense, you get the day off and rest for your semi, but you're out of your rhythm. That at that stage of the tournament, you probably do want to keep playing. And I felt that way, too. I felt exactly the same way. Dimonor is the kind of guy that, granted, he beat him at the start of the year in the team competition, but he was certainly highly unlikely he beats him in best of 5 at Wimbledon. On the other hand, he tests him. Yeah. And it's a kind of test from which Novak would have benefited, in my view. If you had something like 7-5, 3-6, 6-4, 7-6 Djokovic, perfect test heading into maybe out there for 3.5 hours or more too, but then able to come into the semis feeling more finely tuned than he was. So you're right. I have to tell you, it was the most painful moment of the whole fortnight to me was Alex's press conference when he announced the default. He was almost in tears. And because I think it meant so much to him to be in the quarters and have a chance to play Novak in the quarters. Not that he was acting like he was cocky about his chances, but he just wanted the opportunity. And I thought that was very moving because there were 2 or 3 times that he choked up giving his answers.
Yeah, that was a real shame. But yeah, and then to move over to the women's tournament, for Krejcikova to beat Collins, Ostapenko, Rybakina from a set down, and Jasmine Paolini, 4 very different types of players. Obviously, we know her amazing record in doubles and 7 doubles titles, 3 in mixed, and now 2 here with the Roland Garros to go along with it 3 years ago. It's just a really impressive resume that Krejcikova is putting together, and one that we really could not have seen coming with the season that she had. And she had a back problem as well earlier in the year, and basically nothing since the Australian Open quarterfinals. So yeah, she's quite fun to watch when she's really on her game like that.
She is, because she's got that kind of slightly unorthodox forehand that lots of spin, lots of heavy spin. She doesn't blow you off the court with a flat forehand, but it's still very heavy. Yeah. And she's got a nice serve. She's got a good all-around game, spurs herself on all the time, talking to herself in a good way. I was very surprised by the Rybakina win because I thought that Rybakina was kind of poised to take the title at that stage for the second time. And yeah, she got up a big lead in the first set, up 2 breaks, and then closed it out finally, but not so easily, and carried over into the second. And midway through the third, Krejcikova gets the key break. I just felt like, surprised me. I thought Rybakina would do better against her from the baseline than she did. I also thought Rybakina would have a good many easy service games, that she'd really exploit her serve to them. But she was having struggles holding serve even by late in the first set, even in the first set that she won. So that really surprised me. I thought she might be able to serve her off the court, but at the very least, be able to have get through some service games quickly and start putting some pressure on Krejcikova. But it just did not happen. And she was really outplayed. She was thoroughly outplayed. I did not anticipate that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I knew that Krejcikova had a good record against her, and that she could potentially turn a match around like that. I guess I should have maybe seen it when she did break back twice in the first set. But it was definitely surprising how outplayed Rybakina really was by the end, and how easily Krejcikova held to get to the final. And yeah, I mean, of course, then we also had the other semifinal, which was, in many ways the match of the tournament, longest ever.
Yes. Yeah.
Semifinal, and I'm just and I just could never have scripted Jasmine Paolini to have made the back-to-back major finals that she did. It just was not anything close to what I would have expected.
No, great achievement. Great achievement. She's a crowd pleaser. She, somewhat she's diminutive compared to most of these other top players, which makes the gallery sympathetic to her and her plight. And she's got a nice personality out there. But no, I mean, if someone had told me after Roland Garros, so she's also, look out for her Wimbledon again, because she'll be back in the final, I would have laughed. It was, and obviously she should probably have lost to Madison Keys. Yeah. So that was a good break. That was a good break for her. But nonetheless, she did very well to beat Bekic and get herself into the finals. And I hope that, that these sort of twin successes, as I look at it, to get to 2 major finals in a row is success, that she can build on that and prove that she belongs in somewhat elite territory.
Yeah. And then, of course, she competed so hard in the final, and it was just basically that one double fault at 3-all in the game that really separated both of them, and even had her chances to break back. And that last game where Krejcikova was getting a little bit tight, but the serve and the forehand
very tight,
through in the big
very
moments.
tight. Yeah.
Could not hit a backhand in that last game, but the serve and the forehand definitely came clutch.
Yeah, no, she was very tense trying to serve it out. It's true. But Paolini's, it's an opportunity for her now. I mean, we'll learn a lot about her between now and next year's French. That we need to sort of see what she can put on the map in terms of her results in that time, and get to some more finals and see how she plays at the Open. I would say that, given the results she had on both the clay and the grass, there's no reason she shouldn't play well in New York as well. But there's also the danger that she's a scalp right now, as they used to say. She's a target, and that one of the lesser ranked players could pick her off in the second round of the U.S. Open. There's always that danger, but I hope it doesn't happen, because I like having her in the mix, and she's just a little different from the other top players, and very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and then also, you have to bring up, where does Rybakina go from here, because she hasn't made a major final now since the 23 Australian Open, and so it's time for her to really get another major result going. And she has some illnesses as well, that take her out of a lot of big tournaments. And when she does play, she's usually pretty consistent, but just haven't seen that top gear yet in the majors for a while. So
from Rybakina,
yeah,
no, I agree. And obviously there were a lot of times she's been sick and things have happened. But boy, she's shown us how great she can be when she's at her best. And that's why I thought, this is it. She set herself up beautifully. I looked at the 4 players left and I said, surely she's going to win this title. And it didn't happen. So you're right. She's got to sort of show us that she really is capable of being a multi-major winner, and that she's not just going to set up for one Wimbledon. And she's got such appeal, a very low-key personality, kind of quiet personality, and but quiet, but unmistakable self-belief as well. You sort of sense that in her. But on the other hand, these accumulated losses in the majors and close matches and unexpected losses here and there to certain players that could get to her. It's not like she's losing in every major to Iga or to Coco or one of the other very top players. So that's going to concern her. You know, she probably has expected a bit more of herself, but let's see. I mean, look, she's another one that can play on every surface, and she's got that serve, which I think let her down a bit in the semis. And I'm not giving up on her yet.
Yeah. I feel like, Wimbledon has been the most open major for the women basically since, 2017, really. So, it's something unexpected is just happening almost every single year when it comes
True.
to it. I do wonder if Sabalenka would have played, if that would have really changed in terms of, her being so bankable to get to the semifinals of these majors on a regular basis. And also the continued problems that Coco and Iga continue to have on the surface with their extreme forehand grips. And also just, I mean, the match that Iga lost, for instance, in the last two sets was just, kind of just totally melted down, especially on her forehand side. I just didn't expect, that many unforced errors off of those shots that she was making. And, Putintseva played a really awesome match to beat her, but still it was just, a match that you would have expected her to win, even with the limited prep that she had. So.
Very true. I mean, look, I think Swiatek, we should explore that a little bit. I don't want her to be one of these players that's going to end up with 7 or 8 French, no Australian, no Wimbledon, and maybe a second U.S. Open. I think she's better than that. And I'm expecting more. And she had some excuses afterwards about her schedule. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like she's not, Vansh, that Swiatek is not owning up to the losses. She's looking for to a degree to make excuses or has her own explanations. But I really feel like she should do better. I mean, Australia, she just has that's hard courts, and the grass of Wimbledon. In neither tournament has she shown us anything like her best, in my view. And last year's Wimbledon was better than this year's, but still not what it should be. So I'm a bit worried about that. We'll see. I think I'd like to see her. And now, granted, the Olympics is coming up, but I'd like to see Iga play well at the U.S. Open, maybe get a second title there, because she needs to start winning. She's got to get them on the other. She shouldn't just have one major on the other. At the other 3 majors, she's got her 4 French, but I think she's a higher caliber. She's a greater champion than that, in my view. But she's got to prove it. And I don't know. I thought she'd added a lot of aggression to her game in the last few years, and is looking more and more comfortable taking the ball earlier. Serves improved. I thought she might have a pretty decent Wimbledon. I didn't necessarily think she'd win it, but that she could at least go far.
Yeah, I had the same feeling as well. That's why this loss was really just out of nowhere, and she played a very good first set as well. So it just all really got to her. She looked really frazzled and really just, at a loss for what really happened out there. But I just wonder, maybe it might take losing early at Roland Garros one year to win Wimbledon, because I just feel like maybe
that would be interesting.
Maybe the accumulated fatigue as well with the 2-week Masters events. With like winning in Madrid, Rome, and then doing Roland Garros, it might have just been a lot. And I just feel like maybe with the Olympics coming up, she maybe just didn't really. She kind of just thought, okay, we'll see what happens in Wimbledon. And she didn't play any warm-up tournament coming in, which last year
she mentioned that
helped her. So
yeah, she mentioned not playing the warm-up tournament. On the other hand, that's a choice. And there's 3 weeks now. It used to be just 2 weeks, and I always just feel for Rafa coming over to Queens right after winning the French. How difficult that was. Now at least there's 3 weeks. But yeah, I mean, I hope that's an interesting point you make, though, because if for some reason, let's say she had lost the Naomi match at Wimbledon at the French this year, could that have changed things? Maybe. We'll never know. But regardless, I just want to see her kind of demand it of herself, because I think she's capable of being really a great champion. I mean, you look at players like Justine Henin. Justine never won Wimbledon, but at least she was in 2 finals, and she won the other 3 majors. So I like to believe Iga is that kind of a player that can make the surface-to-surface adjustment and prove herself everywhere. And the jury's still out. I mean, I'm glad she's got the one open, but I would hope she can win a few more of those.
Yeah, as well. Yeah, especially because you look at her overall record, like throughout the rest of the weeks, and it's just like it's just impeccable. And then you have
It
these
is, which
outcomes
is
out
what
of it.
makes it makes it doubly disappointing that we see a
Yeah,
result like what she had at Wimbledon.
yeah, for sure. One last player I want to ask you about, and that's Emma Navarro, because she's come on really strong this year.
Mm.
She's she played those two fantastic matches against just really, really awesome stuff against Coco and Naomi. And also just throughout the whole year she's shown it like on every surface. And I really do think there's a top 10 player in there, like a consistent top 10 player. And I wonder how far she can really go, because she sort of hit that wall and played a very strange quarterfinal to me against Paulini. I didn't really fully grasp that result, because there were so many
Yeah,
matches happening.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's no reason why she can't make a really deep run at the U.S. Open, right? So
Oh no, I totally agree. Totally agree. And those were two quality wins. And Naomi's been trying to round into form. She's getting closer to what she once was. She's not quite there, but she's close. She took Naomi apart really badly. And then Coco serving 4-5 in the first set. And I thought this is an open question. And then after getting broken there, it was really not much of a match. Navarro, no, I agree with you. There's clear top 10 potential, not top 5 in my view, but somewhere 8 to 10 is entirely possible.
yeah, for sure. She does so many things really well. There's not like one really standout thing in my opinion, but she's just very well rounded. So we'll see how far that takes me. But Steve, overall, it was a really good Wimbledon on the men's side and the women's side. I'm glad we had some really competitive matches at the end, and with the depth coming through there. So I look forward to the Olympics, which is coming up really quickly now, and of course, at the U.S. Open. But we should have a really good discussion afterwards. So
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, Vach, I really do feel for the players, though, because it's disconcerting to me that you would play, and it was unavoidable. I get that. The Olympics is in Paris. You're not going to play Olympic tennis on hard courts in Paris. I get all that. But to have the players go through the lengthy clay court circuit, basically Monte Carlo on right through Roland Garros, then shift to the grass, then go back to the clay, and then have to leave the clay, Olympic clay, to get ready for the U.S. Open on hard. That's a lot of,
yeah,
oh, that's tough surface changing to me. I mean, I don't envy any of them. It's just not easy on any of them. And it'll be interesting to see if some of the guys who do great at the Olympics, do they not, do they have disappointing opens? Is it just too quick a turnaround? And it's made for a very crowded, complicated summer for all of them in this period from Roland Garros right through the U.S. Open. It's as tricky as it's ever been. And a lot of those guys are going to be very eager to get that gold. Obviously, we know Novak wants it badly, and certainly Carlos does, and certainly Sinner does. They're all going to be gunning for that, and then have to turn it around very quickly to have impact in New York.
yeah, it will be interesting to see how they pace themselves. And I'm guessing the Canada Masters tournament is going to take a big hit, unfortunately for them.
Yes,
But
yes.
but I think something just has to give with this the ridiculously quick turnaround, I guess, between the clay and the U.S. Open hard courts. So it's it's going to be something to monitor as well. And hopefully we don't get too many injuries, and hopefully we get all of them in tip top shape for the last major in the year. Because like you were saying earlier, there's so much on the line for Sinner, Alcaraz, and Djokovic and the rest. So yeah,
There it
looking
is.
forward to it.
Looking forward to it all, though, Vanch, and I enjoyed our talk as always.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and can't wait to do it again after the Open.
Looking forward to it. Hope to see you soon.
All right.